Coming up on this Thursday edition of Newsline at noon, facing the prospect of a permanent closure, North Korea agrees to return to talks on reopening the joint Gaeseong Industrial Complex and lifts an entry ban on South Korean workers. We have a special report on the sudden turn of events. With the Japanese government admitting the operator of the quake-ravaged Fukushima nuclear plant has failed to contain massive radiation leaks for more than 2 years after the meltdown, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe orders his administration to help bring the leaks under control. Plus, US President Barack Obama scraps a planned summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in retaliation for Moscow's decision to grant asylum to US intelligence whistleblower Edward Snowden. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Where's the best place for bibimbap?
Les Jeux Olympiques d'hiver se dérouleront-ils à Pyeongchang?
هل أنتم حقاً سابع أكبر مصدر في العالم؟
この歌手は誰ですか？你好，最近哪部电视剧的人气最旺？
Korea is attracting interest from around the world. The more you know, the more you want to know. Dynamic Korea.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Choi Yusan in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Following 6 previous attempts ending in failure, the two Koreas will sit down next week for a 7th round of talks on reopening the inter-Korean Gaeseong Industrial Complex.
Now, this comes after North Korea made a sudden proposal for dialogue on Wednesday, which many say reflects its determination to prevent a complete lights-out situation at the joint business park. Our Hwang Sung-hee has more.
With fresh hopes for a swift normalization of their jointly run factory zone in the north, the two Koreas will return to the negotiating table next Wednesday. Experts say North Korea's surprise offer to hold a 7th round of talks on reopening the Gaeseong Industrial Complex shows its determination to save the joint business park. The proposal came just an hour after Seoul announced that it would hand out insurance payments to more than 100 South Korean companies with operations in Gaeseong. Once the businesses receive the money, the government acquires the rights to the company's assets at the border town, and many saw the move as Seoul's first step towards a complete closure of the factory park. Pundits say North Korea probably thought likewise and rushed in with its proposal for dialogue. The joint business park has been a source of hard currency for the cash-strapped nation, raking in around $80 million in workers' salaries per year. An upcoming joint military exercise between South Korea and the United States, scheduled to begin on August 19th, may have been another factor that made the North anxious. Once the military drills begin, tensions could rise again on the Korean peninsula, sweeping away the current momentum for talks. But some remain skeptical about Pyongyang's motives, saying that North Korea has not changed its stance on the issue of providing safeguards against future closures of the complex. They say the North may be crafting an excuse to blame Seoul if the complex faces a complete closure, and would likely say that it tried its best to save the last remaining symbol of inter-Korean economic cooperation. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
North Korea has doubled the floor space of its Yongbyon uranium enrichment facility over the period of just 6 months. This according to the U.S.-based Institute for Science and International Security, citing recent satellite images. It says the larger floor space could allow twice the number of centrifuges to be installed there. Pyongyang declared it had some 2,000 centrifuges in 2010. So in theory, it now possesses more than 4,000, which is enough to produce 16,000 separative work units of enriched uranium each year. The institute estimates that amount would allow North Korea to produce enough weapons-grade uranium to make an extra 2 nuclear bombs a year. South Korea's central bank has left its key interest rate unchanged at 2.5%. for the 3rd straight month in August. The Bank of Korea's decision, which was widely expected by analysts, follows its monthly monetary policy meeting on this Thursday. The central bank forecasts the local and global economy will stay on the path of moderate recovery, despite a great deal of economic uncertainty due to the Federal Reserve's planned phasing out of its stimulus program and the slowing Chinese economy. The Korean economy grew 1.1% in the April to June period from the previous quarter, rising above 1% for the first time in 9 quarters. Now that one of the longest monsoon seasons on record is officially over, the sun is coming out and so are the sizzling temperatures. Seoul will melt under the hottest day of the year so far on this Thursday, with a mercury expected to touch 35 degrees Celsius. But it's not the scorching hot weather that's worrying officials. The country's low electricity reserve is what's on their minds. With higher demands for air conditioning, the Korea Power Exchange says a level 1 or prepare warning could be issued on this Thursday. A level 1 warning is issued when the country's electricity reserves fall below 5 million kilowatts. Energy officials say Korea's electricity reserves are expected to be at their lowest from today to next week.
And staying with a related story, the amount people are charged for their electricity usage could be changing from October as the government looks to save energy. Fielding questions on the government's plans to raise rates, Energy Minister Yoon Sang-jik said Wednesday that lower discounted electricity prices could be offered during specific off-peak times. He said the government was reviewing a number of ways to improve the current billing system, adding the government wants to help manufacturers, who are, of course, heavy users of electricity, to focus their key production periods in off-peak hours. The new system will be announced as soon as October. The government hiked the electricity rate in January, the fourth such raise in just 2 years, but electricity is still provided at a price lower than it costs. Now, you can feel it the second you step outside. With heat and humidity levels soaring to record levels, much of the nation feels like a sauna right now. Today is expected to be the hottest day of the year, with temperatures in some areas expected to hit 40 degrees Celsius, and the majority of the country is under a heat advisory. Our Connie Lee reports.
It's a hot, sticky, and sweaty summer, and it's not likely to end anytime soon. Korea is in the midst of a heat wave, with temperatures expected to go beyond 33 degrees Celsius nationwide on Thursday. On top of the heat, high humidity levels have turned much of the nation into a sauna. On Thursday, the humidity in the capital region is expected to be at least an uncomfortable 70%, which is close to the steamy conditions in most saunas, where the humidity is usually at about 95%. The hot and humid days are especially hard on people who have to work outdoors, such as street vendors, who say the weather isn't helping business either.
It's difficult working outdoors under these hot conditions. I don't sell as much, and I have to be careful not to let sweat fall into the food.
But there is one type of business that seems to be doing well these days. Dry cleaners are getting an extra influx of customers who have moldy clothes that need saving.
When people return home from a vacation, they're finding mold on their clothes because of the high humidity levels. So we have more customers coming in to get their clothes cleaned.
The Korea Meteorological Administration says that high temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius and beyond are expected across the nation through next Thursday. Meanwhile, although the monsoon season has officially ended, residents can also expect sporadic rain showers until Saturday. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Korea may be one of the most advanced nations in the world, but when it comes to corruption, the country ranks poorly on the global scale. Our Ji Myung-gil reports on how serious the problem is and how the Korean government say it's committed to stamping it out.
Despite efforts to clean society up, Korea remains beset by a high corruption rate that has only seemed to increase over the years.
Korea is now the most corrupt developed country in Asia, according to a poll of 2,000 foreign businessmen in Asia, sliding down the list for the last 10 years. Korea's image as a fair place to do business is in bad shape.
The Hong Kong-based firm Political and Economic Risk Consultancy ranked Korea the 10th most corrupt out of 17 countries in Asia. The corruption index was 6.98 this year, the worst in 10 years. Many Koreans acknowledge that the country needs to make a serious effort to tackle the problem.
Corruption in Korea is very serious. I think it will never go away in my lifetime.
Korea should quickly enact an anti-corruption bill to eradicate corruption.
Experts say the main form of corruption in Korea is collusion between government officials and the major conglomerates, which exert a great deal of influence over the economy. Personal ties, kickbacks, and lobbying for tax breaks are deeply embedded in Korean society and have contributed to the country's high corruption rate, as have light punishments for people with money and power convicted on corruption charges.
The money talks too much. In other words, the presidential pardon should not be allowed. Everybody should be equal in front of law. So whether you are wealthy or not, law should be equal.
Now the government is stepping in to address the problem. Last week, the cabinet approved the nation's first anti-corruption bill in order to strengthen punishments for government officials accused of various irregularities.
We believe the anti-corruption bill will prevent public officials from accepting illegal favors, kickbacks, and carrying out duties related to their personal interest. The bill will help raise the Korean government's integrity.
The legislation will be submitted to the National Assembly for a vote this month. Kim Young-gyun, Arirang News.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
The Japanese government, for the first time, produced an estimate of how much contaminated water is spilling into the ocean from the damaged nuclear power plant in Fukushima. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe vowed to address the issue at the national level to stop the leak. Our Oh Jin-ju has the story.
The Japanese government estimates that 300 tons of radioactive water are leaking into the Pacific Ocean every day from the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Japan's Nuclear Regulatory Authority said Wednesday that of the some 1,000 tons of groundwater flowing in and around reactors 1 through 4, 300 tons mixed with the highly contaminated water coming from a cable trench under the turbine building before streaming into the sea. The watchdog added that the government is aiming to reduce the volume of the leak to 60 tons of water per day by December. Experts, however, say that goal might be difficult to reach given the government's progress in its cleanup efforts until now. During a nuclear disaster response meeting on Wednesday, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called the spread of radioactive water an urgent issue that is of great concern to the public and pledged government support to address the problem rather than relying on the plant operator TEPCO. Abe also ordered the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry to come up with, quote, multiple, speedy and sure solutions to the issue. The ministry has proposed putting a subterranean barrier around the plant by freezing the ground surrounding it in order to block groundwater from seeping into the wrecked plant in the first place. Construction of the barrier is expected to take up to 2 years and could cost as much as $450 million, which will come directly from the government. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
The chilly relationship between Washington and Moscow just got a little colder. U.S. President Barack Obama has scrapped plans to hold a bilateral summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin following Moscow's decision to grant asylum to the fugitive whistleblower Edward Snowden. Moscow has expressed its disappointment, but says talks can still go ahead if Washington has a change of heart. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Russia says it's disappointed by President Obama's decision to cancel the bilateral summit between Washington and Moscow, but added its invitation is still open. The bilateral summit between Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin was due to be held next month on the sidelines of the G20 meeting in St. Petersburg. President Putin's foreign affairs advisor Yuri Ushakov says that the cancellation is clearly linked to the issue of Edward Snowden's asylum. He argues Moscow was not at fault for its handling of the affair. During a phone conference with the press on Wednesday, Ushakov said that the U.S. has avoided signing an extradition agreement with Russia for many years, adding that Washington has repeatedly turned down Moscow's requests to extradite people who have committed crimes in Russia. Ushakov went on to say that the move showed the U.S. was not ready to build ties with Moscow on a, quote, equal basis, highlighting the underlying tension between the two countries. Earlier, White House spokesman Jay Carney cited a lack of progress in the bilateral agenda between the two countries as the main reason behind the cancellation, but admitted Snowden was a big factor contributing to the decision.
We obviously disagree with the Russians very strongly about the decision they've made on Mr. Snowden. We disagree with the Russians on a number of other issues, including Syria. And we've made those disagreements plain, both publicly and privately, in our discussions with the Russians.
But Carney added Obama will attend the G20 summit meeting in St. Petersburg early next month after making a visit to Sweden. Russia granted Snowden a one-year temporary asylum last week. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Authorities in Yemen say they have foiled a major al-Qaeda terror plot, the latest escalation in an increasingly unstable situation in the Arab country. Park Ji-won reports.
Yemeni authorities say they foiled an al-Qaeda plot to seize two major oil and gas export facilities. An aide for the Yemeni Prime Minister's office said Wednesday that an al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula had been plotting to capture major ports to take control over the country's gas and oil exports. However, a number of media outlets citing unidentified Yemeni government officials have been reporting that the foiled plot doesn't seem to be related to the terror threat that prompted the U.S. and Britain to withdraw embassy staff and citizens from the country. With the heightened security situation, it is thought the U.S. has picked up its use of drone strikes on alleged al-Qaeda militants in Yemen. According to the Yemeni government, a suspected U.S. drone strike in the south of the country killed 7 people thought to have ties to the al-Qaeda network. It is thought at least 4 other drone strikes from Tuesday to early Thursday killed 7 other suspected militants. Meanwhile, amid the fears of a potential al-Qaeda attack, a U.S. Airways flight from Ireland was searched at Philadelphia International Airport upon its arrival Wednesday following an unspecified telephone bomb threat. The threat was dismissed after a thorough screening of the crew and passengers' luggage came up all clear. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Egypt's interim leaders say international mediation efforts to lessen the deep divide between the military-backed government and supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi have failed. A number of envoys from the United States, EU, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates have been working tirelessly in Cairo to find a common negotiating platform to defuse the crisis. Announcing mediation had failed, the interim government said in a televised statement Wednesday that it will now start to break up protests organised by Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood. In a joint statement, US Secretary of State John Kerry and EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton said the deadlock was concerning as the safety and welfare of the Egyptian people are at stake. Scores of flights in and out of Africa had to be diverted or delayed on Wednesday after a massive fire ripped through Nairobi's main airport. Kenya's Jomo Kenyatta International Airport is one of East Africa's busiest air hubs, and many flights from Europe and elsewhere had to be diverted to Mombasa. Kenyan authorities say no one was hurt and the fire has been contained. Still no clue as to what caused the blaze, but officials say they don't think it was connected to terrorism. Shifting gears now, have you ever wished your car had wings so that you could escape the heavy traffic? Well, your dream of flying cars may be realised sooner than you might think. Our Kim Min-ji tells us more about a modern flying car that made its first public appearance at an air show in the US.
Let's take a glimpse at what Earth would look like in the year 2084. This vehicle can fly between buildings, descend vertically, and rotate at a miraculous speed. What you see now is a first flying car developed for commercial use. As the vehicle lands, it folds its wings, turns into a regular car, and speeds down the road. The transition, a car that can change into a plane, aims to make the dream of flying cars possible.
It was neat how quick you could switch between the two. We were making jokes about how, traffic seems to be too big of a burden. You just take off.
The flying car, created by U.S. car manufacturer Terrafugia, was unveiled to the public for the first time during a 10-minute demo at an air show in the U.S. last week. It can accommodate up to 4 passengers and can reach a speed of 185 kilometers per hour in the air and 100 kilometers per hour on the ground.
Well, in terms of the safety precautions, the transition is designed to meet both federal motor vehicle safety standards for driving on the road. So that includes things like you have to have safety cage, crumple zones, airbags, the sorts of features that you have in a modern car today. In addition, we have to meet the ASTM standards for light sport aircraft.
The flying car is still in development, but around 100 people have already made reservations for the vehicle when it launches in 2016. The purchase price of the transition is expected to be around $300,000 US. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Well, why don't we get an update on the forecast now with our Lee Ji-yeon standing by at the Weather Center. Good afternoon to you, Ji-yeon.
Well, good afternoon, guys. And you guys have mentioned temperature will be a record high today, so we need to be extra careful with our health, especially children and seniors.
Yes, I think any time it gets above 33, 34 degrees Celsius, you have to be careful.
Right.
And of course, one thing you do have to be careful of is heat stroke, no matter what your age.
Right. We all need to take extra precautions by staying hydrated, staying out of the sun, and cooling off as much as possible during the day.
Right, it's extremely hot during the day, and the tropical nights we've been having are making it really hard to get us good night's sleep. So we are going through some tough time lately. Now today is expected to be the hottest of the year, with temperatures soaring to the mid to upper 30s across the nation. And as we can see, the heat wave advisories and warnings that have been in effect have expanded to the most of the nation. So really, we gotta stay safe in the heat today. Now tomorrow we are expecting rain in Seoul, Incheon, and Gyeonggi province in the morning hours, but that should taper off before noon and the sun will start to shine again. Meanwhile, the whole nation will continue to feel the effects of the intense heat, and it looks like the hot and muggy condition will continue into next week. Now back to today's forecast. We are looking at clear skies in most regions, but it's a bit misty here in Seoul, but that should burn up soon. So with the sunshine, humidity, which will be about 80% on average, and temperature is expected to hit their peak, it's gonna be a scorcher today. And how hot will it get? Let's take a look. The capital will get up to 35 degrees Celsius, that's 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and Daegu should be steaming hot at 37, and Busan will be picking up to 34. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju and Daejeon will climb up to 35, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang will top out at 33. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me today. Stay cool and safe, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. And back to you, Mark and Yusan in the studio.
Well, thank you ever so much, as always, Jian, for your wonderful weather report there. And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Join us again tomorrow here in Seoul at noon, Korea time.